Hey everyone, Steven here, and today I'm finally getting around to my review of the Sansui G27F6Q-PRO monitor. I've had a lot of people comment on the unboxing video about the final review, and I've been waiting for the views on that video to get a little bit higher before doing the final review, with part of me even leaning towards skipping it altogether, just because I have so many other reviews I have to get to, but I had to come back to this one because this is still one of my all-time favorite monitors, and I have more tests I perform now for my monitor reviews that I wanted to showcase with this. On top of that, the price of this has even come down more from the unboxing video, which is awesome. Here I'm going to be using parts of the unboxing video like the spec section just to make it easier to get all of this done in a timely manner, but I will be adding in the panel settings, my test results, and consoles and what you can do with those here before I do a quick wrap up of what I like about this monitor. Everything I said in the unboxing video still holds true for this though, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that, just expanding everything, and instead it'll be more of like a quick list. With that being said though, let's get into the specs. The G27F6Q-PRO is a 27-inch 1440p IPS panel monitor with a 240Hz refresh rate and a 1 millisecond motion picture response time. This features HDR10, 10-bit color depth. With this, I'm assuming this is 8-bit plus FRC, not true 10-bit color though, and this covers 98% of the DCI P3 and 130% of the sRGB color space. The typical brightness here is 320 nits. Now this being an IPS panel, this most likely has a 1000:1 contrast ratio, though they didn't list this specifically in the specification breakdown. For ports, this has two DP 1.4, two HDMI 2.1, two USB 3.0A, one USB 3.0B, and a 3.5mm headphone jack. Now for the DP port, you can hit the full 240Hz at 2K. With the HDMI port, you can only hit 144Hz at a 2K resolution, and that's not taking into account if you are going to utilize 10-bit color when it comes to HDR. So I'm going to talk about this more in a little bit, but essentially this is a new version. So this is TMDS. So that stands for Transition Minimized Differential Signaling. And this isn't the normal FRL, which is the fixed rate link. So again, I'll talk about this here in a little bit. Keep in mind there are limitations to HDMI when it comes to the refresh rate. For the extra USB ports, these are on the left-hand side. So we have the USB expansion ports here. Very nice to see. You don't always see that on monitors in this price range, especially when they're delivering 240Hz and you have the IPS panel here. I do want to note that on the Amazon listing, there's a picture that says that this has a KVM switch. This is essentially what they're calling the KVM switch, which is just the expansion ports. There is no true KVM switch here. This also has two 2-watt speakers, which I will do a sound test for in a little bit. And for ergonomic adjustments, this has a height adjustment of 130mm. This can swivel to the left and right 30 degrees. This can tilt forward 5 degrees and back 20 degrees. And this can pivot 90 degrees to the left or the right. This is VESA compatible with a 75mm by 75mm pattern. So if you wanted to mount this, you can. Inside of the box, you're going to get a DP cable, a USB A to B cable, the monitor with the stand, the adapter, power cable, and the user manual. Now, in regards to the HDMI 2.1, I mentioned I would talk about this later. Here, I'm going to reference an article from TFT Central. They were confused by this with the monitor. They reached out to HDMI. Essentially, HDMI 2.0 is no longer a thing. So with this, it's now a subset of 2.1. So all the new capabilities and features associated with the HDMI 2.1, those are optional now, and it lists those out. That to me is pretty crazy. And then if the device claims compliance with 2.1, they simply need to state what it supports, which is what this company does. They say with DP, you get the 240Hz, with HDMI, you get 144Hz. Again, these are going to come down to bandwidth limitations, and that's because this isn't the fixed rate link. Now, this is something HDMI has done. They are in compliance here, so this isn't at the fault of Sansui. This has to do with the new model and standards that HDMI has for the HDMI 2.1. So they do specify everything here. They are fully transparent with what the resolution and refresh rate is going to be with each port, but I did want to clarify that because I was super confused, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more confusion with everybody looking at this until everybody kind of just settles into this new model. Next, I wanted to cover the price because this has come down in price since the unboxing video. It was $275 during the unboxing video with a $40 off coupon, bringing it down to $235. Now it's basically $229, $230 with a $30 off coupon. It brings it down to $199.99, so $200, which is incredible considering the features that this has. And I say this for every single review, I judge the monitor based off the price that you can find it at. And with this basically being $200, this is an incredible price for what you're getting, both in terms of performance and the extras that they packed into this. Next, let's do a sound test for the speakers with the camera roughly 3 to 4 feet away from the monitor. And any adjustments in post are really just to the gain to make sure that this sounds as close to how it sounds in person as I can get it. Shifting over now to the panel menu, the menu button is on the back right hand side of the monitor. It's a little bit finicky sometimes. It's easy to accidentally push it in a direction and it may take you out of the menu, but I do prefer the single button over multiple. For the tabs within the panel menu here though, we have input source, brightness/contrast, color setting, picture quality setting, display, audio, multi-window, OSD, and other. For input source, you just choose from the 2 DP or the 2 HDMI ports. For the brightness/contrast, you have brightness, black level, contrast, and then the dynamic contrast ratio. Next, for the color setting tab, you have gamma, picture mode, color temperature, low blue light, hue, and saturation. Looking at the picture modes, which are the picture presets, you have standard, photo, movie, game, FPS, RTS, and sRGB. Looking at the color temperatures here, you have normal, warm, cool, and user, which if you click over to the right with user, you can adjust the RGB color values to this. The panel kind of leans just slightly red. You may want to adjust that down maybe 1 or 2 steps. Be very careful though. If you do too much, it definitely throws it into a completely different hue. Next up, you have the picture quality tab. Here you have sharpness, response time, noise reduction, dynamic luminous control, and the MPRT mode. I'll talk about response time when I get to the test results from the on-screen response time testing tool here in a minute. For the MPRT, you have to have the response time turned to off in order for that to be enabled. When you're using an MPRT mode, it's usually black frame insertion. It is here. I can't showcase any footage. All you're going to see is a black frame as I'm actually rolling the camera. It just seems like it's flickering a bunch with the screen. That's that black frame insertion. And here it dims the monitor a little bit. It gives the illusion that it's faster than it actually is by cleaning up some of the ghosting that potentially is here. But because this is 240 Hertz, there's really not a ton of ghosting that you do find with this monitor. There's a little bit, but the trade-off for the MPRT mode isn't worth it for PC players. But on a console, it may be worth looking into if you do think that there's more visible ghosting than you'd like. After that, you have the display tab, which has aspect ratio and LED mode. LED mode is for the lights on the back of the monitor. After that, you have the audio tab, which has mute, volume, and then audio source. And then you have multi-window. Here you have multi-window, sub-window to input, picture-in-picture size, picture-in-picture position, and then swap. For the multi-window here, if you choose that, you can turn this obviously off, but then you have picture-in-picture mode and picture-by-picture mode. And then next you have the on-screen display tab. This is pretty standard stuff for adjustments that you can make to that. And then last, you have other. Here you can turn on adaptive sync. You can adjust HDR or reset the panel settings. I've had adaptive sync on for all the footage in this video, and when that is turned on, you can enable G-Sync compatibility if you have an NVIDIA GPU. So that's going to wrap it up for the in-panel settings. Next, let's get into my test results. So here we have the test results from the on-screen response time testing tool. For the overdrive, you have 4 modes: off, low, middle, and high. This is with this off. In terms of the results here, there are subtle differences between these modes, which is nice to see. We really don't get any RGB overshoot, which is inverse ghosting, but they have a motion picture response time, and that's really where they're claiming the 1 millisecond motion picture response time. That is a black frame insertion mode. So what you're going to have with that, if I was trying to record it with my camera, for instance, you just see strobing with the monitor. It's not something you would visually see in person. And in terms of the test results here, it would make it so it's fast, but the problem there is it's an illusion. It's a trick for your eye. As they pop that black frame in between every other frame, your eye thinks that everything is going a lot faster, and it does smooth things out a little bit. It does that by obviously that black frame, but also dimming the monitor a little bit, and I don't like the visual look of it. It's not a mode that I prefer, but it is there if you want to use it. Just keep in mind, the panel isn't actually getting faster. It's just a trick that they're doing. But specifically with off here, in terms of the average complete time, 18.09 milliseconds there. Or the 02550, so that's going to be the black to white to black transition. It's 21.4 milliseconds, and then we have the best here at 5, the worst at 17.3. Again, no RGB overshoot, so no inverse ghosting. And then we have the visual response rating, which is taking the perceived response time, the RGB overshoot, and then averaging it and then scoring it. So this basically gets a B. It's an average rating of 80% with this. Next we have low. I will say that this is the best mode out of all of them. Here we do get a subtle bump in increase in the speed of this. We go from the 18 there to the average complete time now of 15.78. The 02550 is 20.1, best is 2.9, worst is 15.6. Still really no inverse ghosting. We don't really have the RGB overshoot. And then we see that go from that 80% average here up to 84%. We see those numbers kind of come up a little bit. And then we have middle. Here it's interesting because we actually start to lose performance just a little bit. So certain areas it may get a little bit faster on our perceived response time chart there, but overall average complete time, it went from the 15, now it's to 16.19. When we go 02550, we're at 21, best is 2.9, and then the worst is 17.7. Same thing for the RGB overshoot. We really don't have any here. So again, no inverse ghosting. And then the average rating here, it went from the 84. Now it's down to 81.67. So we're starting to kind of backtrack a little bit and lose some of the performance upside that we want when we do an overdrive mode. But I'm going to come back to that point here in a second, because there is something that is fascinating at looking at results here and then real world application when we perform like a UFO test, and what I will see with that compared to really what these charts are telling me I should see in regards to that. And then last here we have high. Same thing, we're kind of backsliding just a little bit. So we have the average complete time here of 16.28. It's up because it was 16.19. You have the 02550. This is actually coming down compared to the other ones though, at 19.7. Best is 2.9, worst is 16.5. That came down a little bit. And then RGB overshoot, same thing. We really don't have it here. And then for the visual response rating, the average rating here is 82.56. So kind of sitting in the middle there, but we do notice some of the numbers are a little bit higher. So we are seeing in certain areas it is getting faster, but overall it's pretty subtle between the different modes here. Now this brings me to something that I don't think a lot of times I see covered with other reviews, which is how many frames the display can showcase also matters. So although I am showcasing these tests and it isn't super fast, it definitely isn't the 1 millisecond, this has 240 frames a second that it can do. And because of that, it smooths out any ghosting that you would see. Because when we are looking at, hey, this in terms of the perceived response time has this higher number that isn't 1 millisecond or sub 1 millisecond, what does that mean? It really means that we should see a lot of ghosting potentially. But when you have 240 frames in a second, it smooths a lot of that out. So in terms of motion clarity and ghosting here, am I noticing some if I run a UFO test? Of course I am. It's not as fast as an OLED, for example. But with this, if I was to slow that down, let's say I took this and I dropped it from 240 down to 120, it would be very, very noticeable. It wouldn't look good at all, especially with the numbers that I had on the test results here. But because it displays double that, again, it smooths all of this out. What this really means is, although I am saying, hey, this is pretty slow for a panel, the 240 hertz here makes up for it. I don't notice a ton of ghosting in gaming really at all when it comes to this. Is it there? Is it subtle? Yes. But again, it's not going to be as bad as a VA panel or even some of the other IPS panels that I've reviewed on the channel, because those had slower 165 hertz refresh rates. So this makes up for the panel being slower with more frames and smooths out a lot of ghosting or even black smearing that you may see if this panel was, again, more like 120, 144, or 160 hertz. So there's a trade-off kind of going on here, and one of the reasons why I like this monitor so much is because I really don't notice a ton of ghosting or black smearing, or we proved with the tests there that we don't really have any inverse ghosting, which usually as you increase overdrive, you notice more inverse ghosting. We didn't see that here at all, which is awesome. So yes, it's slower, but in person, as you're using this, you're really not going to have an extreme amount of these things. If you are a hardcore gamer or hardcore enthusiast, you're probably going to notice it more than other people. But for the casual gamer out there, like, this thing is going to be really fast for you. And I also am taking into account the price point here, because the performance it's delivering is something that I would see on a IPS panel that is like double or triple the price of this thing. But I think because of this cheaper price point, we see limitations. Like, there isn't a massive amount of variation between those overdrive modes. And now, as we're getting into the color gamut testing here, we see that with any of the different picture presets, there's actually no difference. Now, when we look at monitors and I test them, usually most of them are the same in regards to the regular picture presets like movie and game and things like that. Here, even the sRGB is the exact same in terms of color gamut, which lets me know that they haven't actually tweaked anything for even the sRGB mode. So factory calibration for this thing doesn't provide any type of variation between the picture presets in regards to color gamut. What you're really seeing is an adjustment to brightness and maybe like color temperature, like it's those subtle things versus anything that is going to really affect the color gamut itself. Here I'm also providing more information because I'm talking about gamut when they're talking about color space, which I will cover those definitions here in a second. I have the game preset and then the sRGB preset here. All of them are the same when I test them though, so these are just two examples. For their specs, 98% coverage of the DCI-P3 color space and then 130% of the sRGB. Here again, we're looking at gamut, and for this we have 100% coverage of the sRGB, 88% of the Adobe RGB, 95% of the DCI-P3, and then 85% of the NTSC, which when it comes to color gamut, this is actually pretty good for their coverage with this monitor, especially compared to the other IPS panels that I've tested that are, again, 2, 3, 4 times the price. They're pretty close when it comes to the results of the Spider X color calibration tool on this panel compared to those other panels, like within a couple percentages of those other higher end panels. So here I think color is really, really good, and just the vibrancy that the panel provides is top notch, again considering the price here as well. When we're looking at color gamut though, let's define these things. The range of colors that a system can display, reproduce, or capture. It's a 2D representation of the range of colors in a color space and can be thought of as the borders of that space. Color space, a mathematical model that defines how colors are represented in terms of numbers. Each color space has a defined gamut, which refers to the specific range of colors it can represent. And then you have saturation. Every now and then a company will talk about saturation. I'm not going to talk about that here, but usually color gamut and color space are the two specs that you'll see that a company provides in regards to the colors for their panel. So my testing here is just to add to the specs that they've given with color space. The takeaway here is that out of the box, this thing looks very vibrant and colorful. In terms of the differences between the presets, there really isn't any, even when it comes to the sRGB mode. So if you need this for some type of workflow based stuff, Photoshop, Premiere Pro, where you need an sRGB mode and you need it calibrated specifically for sRGB, this isn't going to be the monitor for you. For gaming and other stuff where you don't need that very specific color calibration, this thing is going to be just fine. And again, it is extremely colorful and vibrant. Next, let's get into consoles and what you can do with those, starting with the PlayStation 5. You can upscale to 4K. You aren't just stuck with 1440p. 4K, you can do 50 and 60 hertz. You cannot do 120, and you do not have a variable refresh rate. You do have HDR across the board, regardless of the resolution though. For 1440p, you have 60 and 120 hertz. So 4K is the only one where you will not have the 120 hertz, but for 1440p and 1080p, you do have that 120 hertz. 1080p here, same as the 1440p. The only difference is that you're going to get access to the 50 hertz if you wanted it. Here, just confirming, you do not have support for variable refresh rate, and then you do not have support for auto low latency mode either with this. Shifting over to the Xbox Series X, pretty much the same outside of one difference that I'll showcase here in a second, but 1440p, 60 or 120 hertz, same for 1080p. 4K, you can only do up to 60 hertz. Here, just showcasing the setting options that you have available to you. So it shows, hey, you can do 4K at 10-bit, which is HDR at 50 hertz, 60 hertz. You do have access to the HDR10, but here it's just referencing HDR in general, because remember, this is going to be 8-bit plus FRC. And then you can get the 1440p 120 hertz with this as well. In terms of modes, you can do 50 hertz, but here's where it's different than the PlayStation 5. You can do variable refresh rate on this, either always on or only when you're gaming. You cannot do that with the PlayStation 5, but you can do it with the Xbox Series X. And then here, allow 4K, allow HDR, auto HDR. It says Dolby Vision for gaming is checkmarked, but then it's blanked out. This doesn't have Dolby Vision. That's a proprietary type of HDR, so you will not have access to that either. So now that I've covered the specs, the in-panel settings, my test results, and what you can do with consoles, let's get into what I like about this monitor. Here, this is my favorite to date budget-friendly monitor. So this one coming in at its current price point with the performance that it delivers, it just takes that top spot for me because it is offering great visuals, great performance, and a bunch of extras you really don't find in this price range with monitors with similar specs. And I just want to get this right out of the way. I don't have any negatives here. There's nothing that I've seen with this monitor that is a standout negative. There's really just a ton of upside and good things with this monitor. There's a couple gray area things, but even those are hard for me to justify just with how much it is bringing to the table. And to just touch on each of the things that I think are a big draw for this monitor really quick here, I want to talk about the overall visuals that look really good. You have the 1440p resolution at the 27-inch screen size, so the pixel density here is really good. It's not going to obviously best 4K, but in terms of visuals, if you're playing on a 1080p monitor and you jump to this, there's going to be a huge increase in the visual fidelity for you. And with the colors here, they are extremely vibrant. They pop off screen. This offers a good amount of adjustments with the in-panel menu. It feels a little bit dated, but that's not something that I'm going to really judge this harshly on because of the price point that it has. So there's certain things that if it was double, triple the price that I do find with other monitors with similar specs, I'm going to judge it closer to those. But this coming in at a fraction of the cost, there's certain things that I'm not going to really care too much about because it is such a budget-friendly monitor. So in-panel menu, it does offer a good amount of adjustments with it. It's certain adjustments and tweaks, or for instance, the fact that we really don't have a huge difference between certain presets in terms of the color calibration, so it's not really factory calibrated for different modes, but out of the box, it looks really good. And this isn't a monitor that I would get if I needed a specific color gamut or color profile mode that was geared towards certain workflows, like being a photographer that needs to use Photoshop with a specific type of color calibration or color gamut or color space mode. For the performance, we have the 240 Hertz with this, and although my test didn't show anywhere near the 1 millisecond motion picture response time, if you did the motion picture response time mode on this, that's where you could get, with my testing tool, the 1 millisecond, because again, they're doing black frame insertion. So with that, it's just tricking the tool, it's tricking your eye to make you think that this is actually a lot faster than it is. Regardless of that though, even though it is slower, there are so many frames here that visually it looks very clear. Very minimal ghosting, very minimal black smearing, no inverse ghosting. This is up there with, again, those monitors with similar specs that are double, triple the price in terms of this performance. And in certain instances, I would even say that this is better on the performance side visually. It may not do it with the test, but visually, if you're sitting in front of the monitor, if I'm going with an IPS panel, similar specs, but let's say it doesn't have the 240 Hertz, it only has 144 or 160. This, I think, side by side would look slightly better because you have more frames that you are displaying, so it cleans a lot of that up. Not only with a UFO test, but when you're actually playing games as well. And both the visual fidelity and the vibrancy of this monitor and the performance are both applied to PC but consoles as well. Now, if you want to take full advantage of the monitor and get the full 240 Hertz, obviously you're going to need to use a PC. So if you just had a console, that's something to be mindful of. But with this costing what it costs on sale, I would say I would even recommend this for people that just play consoles. If you didn't need 4K 120 Hertz, if you're okay with 1440p 120 Hertz or 4K 60 Hertz, then this is going to be a really good monitor for you as well. Really, the only thing that you're lacking is that 4K 120 Hertz. And then if you're on an Xbox Series X, you don't get the Dolby Vision. And then you don't get the auto low latency mode on either one, but that's not a mode that I use necessarily all the time. Here, again, it's going to be good for both PC and consoles. And last, we have all of the extras that they've managed to pack in with this that usually you do find on those monitors that are double or triple the price, but we're getting it at this fraction of the price, where if we're looking at the same price range, you don't find a lot of this stuff. You usually don't get all of these mechanical adjustments. Usually you maybe get like a tilt, maybe height, but you're not going to get tilt, height, swivel, pivot. You usually don't get extra USB ports. Or if you do, it's a trade-off, right? Like you won't get the mechanical adjustments, but you'll get like an extra 1 or 2 USB ports. Here you get both. You also get the RGB lighting. A lot of the monitors in this price range that again have similar specs, they don't have RGB lighting with them. Or again, you're usually missing something. We'll give you RGB lighting, but you're not getting the extra USB ports. And then this has the built-in speakers on top of that. And you usually don't find that either. So they've given you all of these extra things with this. They've covered everything outside of a USB Type-C port and a KVM switch. And that would be like the gray area, I guess, but it's hard. I'm struggling to justify that. They've already given all these other things that, again, most monitors just don't have in this price range. They've given it to us on top of really good visuals and performance. Now, those things matter most, because if it didn't deliver on the visuals and performance, I wouldn't really care what extras it had. It's not a monitor that I want to use. Here they do deliver that, and then they give you all this extra stuff that, again, you usually just don't find. So although my brain is like, yeah, it's missing a USB Type-C port that would charge and it could be used as a display input, and then we don't have a KVM switch with these extra USB ports, but that is something that would increase the overall cost. And also at that point, I feel like I'm just being greedy. I'm like, you guys should give us more stuff. I know you've already given us all this extra stuff that we usually don't see, but give me more. And so although it's missing here, I'm having a hard time even saying that that's a gray area thing just because they've given us so much here. And I'd say one other thing that would be like a gray area thing, but it's just, I can't justify it. So although I'm saying like this is kind of the gray area stuff, like I don't think that this really has gray area things because I feel greedy, but I did still want to actually talk about it. So I'm like so on the fence about even saying it's a gray area thing. With that being said though, I would add HDR to that. This isn't a monitor that if you really want good HDR, you're going to get it. We don't have any local dimming zones with this. In terms of HDR, this being like true 10-bit color, this is 8-bit plus FRC. Visually, most people's eye won't even notice a difference, but again, it's just not true 10-bit color. It looks decent on consoles. If you spend a little bit of time adjusting it on PC, you can get it to look decent. But if you're like, I need a really good HDR monitor, this just isn't going to be the monitor for you. Outside of that though, I think if you tinker around with it, you can get it to look good. It's just not going to look incredible. It's not going to compare to much higher end monitors like an OLED or monitors that have a ton of local dimming zones or anything like that. So in conclusion, this is one of my favorite all-time budget-friendly monitors. The performance here, the visuals are amazing. They gave us so much more in terms of extras than I've seen with other monitors with a similar price point. And although I mentioned some of these gray area things or potential gray area things, I think you're gonna have a hard time justifying that this should have those things, which is why I'm so on the fence. Because of how affordable this is, to be like, well, we need a KVM switch and we need that USB Type-C and we need local dimming zones and better HDR. When you're getting such an amazing deal, it's just hard to justify. So if you've been looking for a new monitor, you want to upgrade your setup, this one from Sansui, 1440p, 240 Hertz, is an incredible deal. And for me right now, this is holding the top spot for all-time favorite budget-friendly monitor. So that's gonna wrap this video up. Sorry for making everybody wait for the final review here. Finally got it done though, so hopefully anybody that was on the fence, you now have a little bit more information to inform your purchasing decision. If you do want to pick this up, I will have a link in the description if you want to grab this. If there's anything that I didn't answer or cover in this video, let me know in the comment section. I will make sure to answer that for you there. And that's it for this one. If you like the video, hit the like button for me as it helps the channel out. If you want to continue to follow along with all my content, hit the subscribe button for me. And as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.